So who makes up the female prison population and what's the impact on their families? I talked to Todd Clear. He's a professor of criminal justice at Rutgers University.
So you can divide the numbers of women who are incarcerated in the U.S. into two broad groups. There's a very large group of people who are in for drug-related offenses. Women get involved in drug crimes in a variety of ways, including sale and distribution, but also involvement in groups that are engaged in the drug business, and they get caught up in the sweeps there. And then a large segment of women are in prison for violent crimes, particularly in relation to men, often men who have abused them, often violence in relation to other family members.
And in a lot of cases, these women are mothers. So what is the impact on the family structure at home?
A very high percentage of women who end up in prison have children. For the most part, those children are raised by other family members. And one of the most significant challenges for women who spend time in prison is reconnecting to their children when they are released from prison. For women who serve short sentences, there are often ways of keeping that connection to their children while they're incarcerated. But women who are locked up for 5, 8, 10, 12 years find their children are grown up by the time they are released from prison, and those relationships are more challenging to reestablish.
So how do we ensure equal rights and dignity for all these women while they're in confinement?
The equal rights problem is really one of ratcheting down our prison system for all groups, people of color, whites, women and men. That said, what we know is that the kinds of programs that tend to proliferate in prison settings have been designed with men's issues in mind, and that for women to succeed after release from prison, it often takes a different kind of programming, particularly programming built around reconnecting them to their families, that you don't find in the men's prison setting. Children whose parents go to prison, on the average, face enormous challenges. So, for example, they're 25% more likely to get involved in the justice system. They're 25% more likely to be truant from school or to have mental illness problems. Locking up women in the first place is making a decision about those children and their life chances that when they've done nothing wrong. But then when women are released, the need to design support systems that enable them to reconnect to their families is very strong, and yet we don't have good mechanisms for doing that. And very often, the law has required them to separate from their children and from their families. On the average, women who are released from prison represent much less of a risk of recidivism than men, on the average. Women are pose much less of a risk to the public. We can let women out with shorter sentences without undue regard for public safety problems. And yet, we don't have the kinds of support systems that enable those women to succeed. And for the most part, we don't have programs that have been proven to be successful with women. They're not studied very well. The kinds of special problems that women face in reentry are not worked with very effectively.
And that was Professor Todd Clear from Rutgers University.